The strangest experiences of a human life almost never arrive during calm, ordinary hours. They appear at the highest peaks of existence during birth and death, in moments of overwhelming love, unbearable grief, sudden danger, or life-changing crisis. The deepest intuitions, the meaningful coincidences, and those extraordinary moments when the inner world and the outer world seem to move together as though guided by one hidden design, gather around intense emotion, the way iron filings gather around a magnet. Tonight, Jung is going to reveal why. Understanding this protects you from one of humanity's oldest and most dangerous mistakes while replacing it with something far truer and far more valuable. Let him begin with the pattern itself, because once you recognize it, you begin to see it everywhere. Think back over the strangest moments of your own life, or the remarkable stories shared by people whose honesty you trust. Perhaps it was a dream that somehow knew what it could never have known, a sudden certainty about someone that later proved entirely correct, an uncanny coincidence that felt almost deliberately arranged, or an intuition that arrived long before the evidence appeared. Now ask yourself one simple question. When did these experiences occur? Almost never during an ordinary afternoon filled with routine. They gathered around life's emotional summits: a death, a great love, an overwhelming fear, a devastating loss, a moment that permanently divided life into before and after. The deepest movements of the soul accompany the deepest movements of feeling. They seek one another. When every emotion becomes powerful enough to shake a person to their foundations, the hidden world seems to draw near. It is there, far more than anywhere else, that the boundary between inner experience and outer reality becomes unexpectedly thin. The obvious question is why? Why should emotion become the doorway? The answer lies in the structure of consciousness itself. During ordinary life, the surface mind remains fully occupied. It plans, analyzes, judges, compares, worries, organizes, and fills awareness with an endless stream of commentary. Its constant activity leaves almost no room for anything quieter or deeper to be heard. The unconscious never disappears. It simply waits beneath the noise. Now consider what a truly powerful emotion does. A profound grief, a great love, an overwhelming terror, a life-changing shock. Each of these interrupts the ordinary dominance of the conscious mind. The intellect loses some of its control. Its endless commentary becomes quieter. Its confident grip begins to loosen. As the surface consciousness descends, the deeper psyche naturally begins to rise. Into the opening left by the quieted intellect, the unconscious steadily moves upward. That is the mechanism. Strong emotion does not create the depths, it simply makes them audible. Earlier psychologists described this process with a phrase that deserves to be remembered. They called it a lowering of the level of consciousness. You have almost certainly experienced it yourself. During overwhelming grief, terror, or ecstatic joy, awareness narrows. The broad landscape of ordinary consciousness contracts. Everyday concerns fade into the background. Thoughts that seemed important only moments before simply disappear. The carefully managed personality begins to loosen. That narrowing is not a malfunction. It is the very condition that opens the way. As the bright surface recedes, the deeper layers of the psyche gather pressure until they finally emerge into awareness. Dreams become unusually vivid. Intuitions become unexpectedly clear. Symbols rise naturally from below. The unconscious finds its opening. There is another reason emotion matters so profoundly. The great archetypal patterns themselves are never emotionally neutral. They are charged with immense psychological energy. They do not arrive as dry intellectual concepts. They come clothed in awe, fascination, dread, reverence, wonder, or overwhelming significance. Whenever one of these primordial patterns awakens within the psyche, it seizes the whole personality. It refuses to remain unnoticed. Emotion therefore performs two functions at once. It opens the doorway, and it announces that something deep has entered through it. The emotional intensity is often the unmistakable sign that one of the great archetypal forces has become active within the soul. Among all emotional situations, one opens the unconscious more powerfully than almost any other. The impossible situation, the crisis with no visible solution, the problem that intelligence cannot solve, the place where every rational path has reached its end. Jung witnessed this pattern repeatedly throughout his work. As long as consciousness still believes it can solve the problem, it continues keeping the unconscious at a distance. But when every logical strategy fails, when genuine emotional crisis leaves no obvious way forward, something remarkable often happens. A dream appears, a symbolic image emerges, an unexpected intuition arrives, a meaningful coincidence unfolds, something rises from below that the conscious intellect could never have invented for itself. The impossible situation becomes the great summoner. The unconscious comes nearest precisely when consciousness has exhausted its own resources. If you have noticed that your own deepest intuitions and most meaningful experiences appear during life's greatest emotional moments rather than during its ordinary routines, then you have already witnessed this law at work. Stay with Jung, because what comes next marks the boundary between genuine psychological wisdom and one of the oldest illusions humanity has ever believed. The ancient world noticed exactly the same pattern. Long before modern psychology, thoughtful observers recognized that extraordinary emotional states were often accompanied by extraordinary experiences. They saw something real, but then they made one crucial mistake, and that mistake still shapes the modern world today. The ancient world recognized this connection between overwhelming emotion and extraordinary experience long before psychology ever existed. Its thinkers observed that whenever the soul was seized by profound love, unbearable grief, consuming hatred, or passionate longing, strange events seemed to gather around it. Dreams became unusually vivid. Coincidences multiplied. Hidden knowledge surfaced. Something beyond ordinary life appeared to draw near. They had discovered something genuine. They had seen exactly what Jung himself would later observe. The deepest movements of the psyche gather around the deepest movements of feeling. But then, they made a fatal mistake. They explained it as magic. They concluded that intense desire itself reaches outward and reshapes reality. If you wanted something strongly enough, they believed the universe would eventually bend until it reflected your wish. Jung rejected that conclusion completely. Strong emotion does not give you magical authority over the world. No matter how intensely you desire something, reality does not reorganize itself simply to satisfy your longing. The universe is not a servant waiting to fulfill the wishes of human beings. This illusion has appeared in every civilization. It merely changes its language, and it always produces the same outcome. It inflates the ego. It creates impossible expectations, and eventually it leaves people bitterly disappointed when life refuses to obey their desires. Listen carefully to the voices surrounding the modern world. The teaching has never truly disappeared. It has simply changed its vocabulary. People tell you that your thoughts attract reality, that the universe responds to emotional certainty, that success, health, abundance, and happiness belong automatically to whoever believes strongly enough. Hidden beneath those attractive promises lies an astonishing cruelty. If desire alone creates reality, then suffering becomes your own fault. The grieving parent, the innocent child, the honest person struck by illness, the victim of tragedy. According to this philosophy, each has somehow failed to believe correctly. Jung regarded such thinking as both psychologically false and morally dangerous. Reality does not mirror the intensity of your wishes. Those who teach otherwise have simply dressed one of humanity's oldest magical fantasies in modern language. Now let him show you what actually happens. The truth is quieter, far humbler, and infinitely more profound. Powerful emotion does not produce the meaningful event. Your feeling is not a force reaching outward into reality. Instead, both the emotion within you and the meaningful event outside you arise from one deeper source. When one of the great archetypal patterns awakens within the unconscious, it expresses itself simultaneously in two directions. Within the soul, it appears as overwhelming feeling. Within the outer world, it appears as meaningful coincidence. The inner experience and the outer event belong together, not because one causes the other, but because both emerge from the same underlying reality. The emotion is not the power. It is a sign that the deeper power has become active. This distinction changes everything. According to magical thinking, you are the cause, your desire becomes the engine, the universe becomes the obedient machine. That path always ends in grandiosity. Jung's understanding is entirely different. You are not the source. Something far deeper than your conscious personality is moving through both your inner life and the events unfolding around you. You do not command it. You cannot manufacture it. You cannot summon it by intensity of will. It arrives according to its own mysterious order. Your powerful emotion simply tells you that it has drawn near. The wise person responds with humility. The foolish person mistakes proximity for ownership. This is one of the oldest temptations in human history. Someone feels an immense force moving through their soul and concludes that the force belongs to them, that they themselves have become its master. Nothing could be further from the truth. The very moment the ego claims possession of a power greater than itself, it begins to lose contact with that power altogether. This is why Jung wanted to leave the modern world with a warning. Do not believe those who promise that emotion alone can reshape reality. Do not believe that wishing intensely enough obligates the universe to obey, that ancient magical illusion has simply changed its appearance. It still leads exactly where it always has: inflated pride, false certainty, and eventually profound disappointment. The truth is far more liberating. You are not the ruler of reality. You are a human being through whom, during life's greatest emotional moments, something far deeper occasionally passes. When it does, the inner world and the outer world briefly move together in meaningful correspondence. You did not create that correspondence. You cannot command it. You can only recognize it when it appears. And that recognition is the beginning of wisdom. So what then should you actually do with this understanding? Certainly not what the believers in magic would advise. You do not deliberately stir up overwhelming emotion in the hope of forcing meaningful coincidences or bending reality toward your desires. That is the road of illusion. It leads nowhere worth traveling. Instead, you do something far quieter. You recognize that your deepest emotions, your genuine griefs, your greatest loves, your profound fears, your true crises are the moments when the unconscious comes nearest and the boundary between your inner world and the outer world becomes unusually transparent. Rather than being carried away by those emotions unconsciously, you remain awake within them. You observe them, you listen carefully. You search for their meaning instead of trying to use them as tools of control. Those rare moments are often the times when something greater than your conscious personality has drawn close. The person who neither suppresses those feelings nor mistakes them for supernatural power is the one capable of receiving what those extraordinary moments have to teach. Think especially about grief and love. These are perhaps the two emotions that open the human soul more completely than any others. Profound grief strips away the ordinary structure of daily life. Everything familiar grows strangely quiet. The carefully organized personality loses its certainty. People discover depths within themselves they never knew existed. It is hardly surprising that those who mourn often report vivid dreams, powerful intuitions, meaningful coincidences, or quiet experiences that seem to connect them with something beyond ordinary awareness. Grief has lowered the surface consciousness. The deeper psyche stands exposed. Love opens exactly the same doorway from the opposite direction. The boundary between self and world becomes unexpectedly thin. Everything appears charged with meaning. Ordinary life suddenly shines with extraordinary significance. These experiences are not simply illusions to dismiss. They are signs that the deeper layers of the psyche have drawn unusually close. Love and grief become two great gateways through which the unconscious most readily enters conscious life. The wise response is therefore not merely to survive grief or celebrate love. It is to recognize that during both, a doorway stands open which remains closed through much of ordinary existence. These are the seasons when the soul speaks most clearly. They deserve attention. They deserve humility. They deserve awareness. So Jung leaves you with the question that separates genuine wisdom from one of humanity's oldest illusions. You have almost certainly noticed that your most meaningful experiences gathered around your greatest emotional moments. Perhaps, like so many others, you have wondered whether your emotions themselves possessed some hidden power over reality. But what if your feelings are not magical forces at all? What if they are something far stranger? What if they are simply the inner expression of a deeper reality that simultaneously shapes both your soul and the events unfolding around you? A reality you do not command. A reality you cannot manufacture. A reality that simply draws near during life's greatest moments and invites you to witness its presence with open eyes. If tonight you understood why your strongest emotions become the doorway through which the deeper psyche enters conscious awareness, then write 3 words in the comments. Write, "The door opens." Jung wants to know how many of you have recognized that deeper presence drawing near during moments of overwhelming love, profound grief, great fear, or life-changing transformation, and how many were taught to dismiss those experiences as nothing more than powerful emotion. Stay for the next video, because beneath the emotions, beneath the meaningful coincidences, beneath every strange experience Jung has explored, there lies one final reality quietly organizing what appears to be the chaos of existence. It hides inside the most ordinary thing you encounter every day. Once you recognize its true nature, you will never look at the world in quite the same way again. That is the next door.